the second Sunday of Easter in the church. And so last week was Easter Sunday. I'm going to sit a little closer to my family. So last Sunday was Easter Sunday, and it was the first. And the story of Easter is that Jesus dies, and he's put into his tomb, and they go to find him, and he's gone, and he's resurrected. And so I've been thinking a lot the last few weeks about resurrection and about death, and how the two are intertwined. They require each other to exist. You can't resurrect, you can't be reborn if you don't die. It just doesn't happen. It's an important thing. And so I've been thinking about it in three different ways. And so I'm going to sort of lay those three ways out for you guys to think about as part of this Easter process. And so the first way I was thinking about it was just straight up human life, right? Like when we die, obviously everyone dies. Right now that's a fact for our society. And when you die, there's this nature in Christianity, there's this belief in Christianity of rebirth, of going to heaven. And I have been questioning myself around what that is. And so the way I've been thinking about it in terms of human death is that really resurrection doesn't necessarily mean bodily resurrection for us today, but rather it means living on, living a new life, and what that is. And so I've been in conversation with my mother about it because she has cancer, and this has been a long journey. I mean, 20 plus years ago, she got cancer for the first time, then she was clear for 20 years, clean of cancer, and then it came back, and now we're in this process of knowing that she's got, at most 10 to 15 years left. And how do we embrace that and engage that? What are the conversations we have around that? And one of the conversations I've been having is, what do you want your resurrection to look like? When you die, how do you want to see that? And I made the mistake of using that language, which means something to me but doesn't mean anything to her. But it's a really important thing of how does she want to live on? Through my brother and me, through the people that knew her and loved her. What stories does she want us to tell? When she first was diagnosed with cancer, I was 3 or 4 years old. No, maybe 4 or 5. My brother was a year or two old. And she was looking at it through the lens of these little children, and she said, if I die tomorrow, what are they going to remember? They don't know me. They've hardly met me, and how are they going to remember that? And she went back and she looked at these videos of her and me when I was a child, and of her and my brother, what little time they'd had, and of her when she was even younger, and she was really impressed with how she was living her life and how, what we would remember. But it's something to think about, like that what we do in this life and the relationships we have affect how our resurrection will take place, how we will be, reborn after we die through the people that love us and know us, and how they'll carry us on. So that's one way of thinking about death and resurrection. Another way that I was thinking about it was in kind of terms of how you live your life, as far as needing to let things that you're holding on to go and allow them to die so that you can move past them and live a better life. And so I think about like relationships. If you've been in a tough relationship and it ends and you kind of are holding on to it, but you don't want to let it go, but you do want to let it go, but you can't let it go, but you do want to let it go, and if you let it go, you'll be able to be happy, and you'll be able to move on, and you'll be able to get your schoolwork done, and you'll be able to sleep again, but there's this like not being able to let go of this thing. And that sometimes the best thing we can do is allow the things that are precious to us die, which is a really difficult thing, especially in our society. We don't like to let things die. We don't like to let things go. It's really hard. It's really hard to think about that. And it can be anything. I mean, I struggle with it right now with the things that I own. My television, my Xbox, these things that pull me away from doing better work in the world. And I know that if I could let my relationship with those things die, if I could let them go, my life would be so much better. I would have a resurrection in my life because I would have more time to spend with people in ministry. I would have time to, go and read, things that are really important and need to be read, to write music, to, in all these things that I could be doing that would be so much more life-giving. and so much more of a resurrection than what I'm doing right now, which is this sort of living in my cave at home, sitting there watching my TV and playing. So it's this idea of needing to let some things go in our lives to be able to move on to resurrection. And then that leads me to this other idea, which is really like the key central thing that I've been thinking about, and is really important right now. This church is sponsored by the United Methodist Church, and so a lot of what we do is in relation to the United Methodist Church, and there's a really serious thing happening in the church right now. And this next weekend is the first day of our general conference, the United Methodist General Conference, where all the annual conferences from around the world send delegates to vote on key issues. And one of the major issues is striking some discriminatory language from our rule book around gays and homosexuals and gay marriage, and allowing openly gay pastors to be pastors in our church. And it's a really challenging time in the church. It's a very challenging time. And so thinking about that idea of letting something go, I started thinking about like what needs to die in the church. And it spread for me to a lot of things outside of even just this one issue that is so prevalent right now because it's going to be voted on in a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I started thinking about, there's a research project out called the Barna Research Group that did a thing where they interviewed like thousands and thousands of 16 to 29-year-olds about church, why they go and why they don't go. And it's incredible, the response, especially when you read some of their thoughts about what Christians are, that the words that they use are like unloving, hypocritical, gay, hate, homophobic, just this whole list of things. And so part of my personal research that I did around that was then I went and took just a straw poll on Facebook and Twitter, and I just put a thing out and said, hey, who's excluded from the church right now? In your mind, who's excluded from the church? And I got really interesting responses. And what was surprising to me is that people not in the church responded with, I believe young people are being excluded from the church right now. Which is something that I had never heard. Because you go into church buildings and all they talk about is vital congregations. How are we going to get more young people in? They're like seeking it, they're searching for it, they're trying to grasp onto it. And so to hear somebody say young people who have a mind of their own, who are engaged in socio-political issues, are being excluded from the church because the church is choosing not to engage in those issues. And like right there is a really clear, like obvious death thing, because churches are getting older. The average age of the congregation in the United Methodist Church is, I think, 65 years old. It's the average age. And so with the churches getting older, there's this clear need for actual death to happen, to be able to move on, because we're holding on to some things that are part of society from before, but the church hasn't moved beyond them. The church is holding on to these things around exclusivity, around struggling with gay marriage, around all these things, and to allow that to die is what we need to resurrect into this new church of inclusiveness, of love, of social action, of political action. And so there's this real need in the church right now to allow death to happen. And it's informed my service for the church, because I think about, like, when I walk into a church as a young adult, I feel pressure to save the church. And I'm starting to realize now that the only way to save the church is to allow it to die. It's not an easy thing. But, to be positive, there's great things that come out of that. There's great things that can come out of that. And I see churches all the time that have embraced the death and engaged this new life, this resurrection. And I look at Wesley here, what we do here with inclusivity, that we don't push anybody out. We welcome everybody in. I look at First United Methodist Church downtown where I'm involved, and they do the same thing. They're very politically active, very motivated. They have talks on homelessness. They have talks on being gay in the church and all these things. And so there are churches that are doing this. and it is happening. And so I think there's this really positive swing, and it's about embracing that and letting go of this other thing. So those are my thoughts for you. It's a short message. I'm not Roger. I don't engage a lot with telling a lot of stories. I'm not like a lot of pastors say. Why say in 10 words what I can say in 50? But I'm not. That's not my MO. So yeah. So the thing I want to think about this next week is just how do we embrace the death of the things that are holding us back, whatever they may be. And maybe they're systematic things like the church, like the government. I think it lives on in all these things. But how do we embrace the death of the things that we are holding on to so that we can engage in this new resurrection? Because as a church of resurrection, we are awfully scared of dying. Cool. All right. So let's move on to the next thing then.